Grandpa, Dad wants you to sign some papers tonight to transfer your house. These words from my own grandson froze my blood during our family dinner. At 72 years old, I found out I was the target of a scheme to steal my inheritance. And what I did next will shock you. Could your family ever try something like this against you? Let me tell you how we got here. But first, subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching this story from. I'd love to know just how far this is reaching. My name is Norman Price. I'm 72 years old and I live in Columbus, Ohio. I retired 7 years ago after running my construction company for 4 decades. Every day I wake up at 6 in the morning, make my coffee, and sit on the porch of the house I built with my own hands. I look at Ellen's pictures on the little table next to me, my wife who passed away 3 years ago. That's how I start every morning, remembering who I am and what I've accomplished. Do you know what it's like to have every corner of your house full of good memories? This routine gives me strength to face the day. I started from nothing, hauling cement bags when I was young, and ended up employing more than 50 families in the area. The house where I live isn't just an address. It's the result of decades sweating under the Ohio sun. Ellen always said that what we built represented our story. Every remodel a victory, every room a memory. Have you ever stopped to think about the real value of everything you've built in your life? My greatest joy has always been my grandson, Ethan, who is 10 years old. He comes here every weekend, helps me water his grandma's plants in the backyard, and listens to my stories about my construction days. He's a smart kid, the kind who pays attention to details and asks smart questions about what life used to be like. Ellen used to say he had a genuine curiosity about the important things in our family. Have you noticed how some kids have that natural wisdom? After Ellen passed away, the house became quieter, but not less special. Every morning I walk through the rooms we built together, remembering the plans we made, the dreams we achieved brick by brick. This property is more than just a home. It's the legacy of an entire life of honest work. I think every man who worked hard understands that feeling of looking around and seeing his story told through the walls. First came the request for money. David would show up here at my house with that look of someone going through hard times, talking about the car payments, the expenses with Ethan at school, the bills that didn't add up at the end of the month. Linda stood next to him, nodding her head, saying that times are tough for everyone. Of course, I always helped. What father doesn't want to see his son doing well? But something in their tone bothered me, like it was my obligation to solve the financial problems they had created themselves. It was always the same story. They arrived smiling, told me about their struggles, and left with money in their pockets. Then came the suggestions about the house. "Dad, this property is way too big for you alone," Linda would say, looking around like someone sizing up a place. David would add, "It's a lot of work to maintain, right? And those taxes every year." They started talking about making my life easier, about how it would be more practical if I lived somewhere smaller. You know when someone talks like they're doing you a favor, but you can feel there's something behind it? It was like my house had suddenly turned into a problem that needed to be solved, and I hadn't even been asked about it. Then came the comments about my age. "Dad, have you thought about having someone help you with important documents?" David would ask during their visits. Linda would chime in, "Legal stuff like that is complicated, Norman. We could take a look, get everything nice and organized." They spoke slowly to me like I was a child who couldn't understand things anymore. Have you ever been treated like you've lost the ability to think for yourself? It was humiliating to feel like they thought my mind had become something fragile, incapable of making simple decisions. The last straw was the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. Those whispers in the kitchen that stopped as soon as I walked into the room. Linda would scroll on her phone and show something to David, whispering numbers that I couldn't quite hear. It was like I had become invisible in my own house, just an obstacle between them and something they wanted badly. Have you ever felt like a stranger in the very place you built? I started noticing that their visits followed a pattern, always looking at the same corners, always making the same comments about wasted space. But I swallowed it all in silence, just like Ellen always taught me. "Norman, family is family," she used to say. "We forgive, we understand, we give one more chance." So I pretended not to see the signs piling up right under my nose. I kept being the kind and generous father and father-in-law, the grandpa who always helped when they needed something. But some lines once crossed, there's no going back. And I was about to find out just how far betrayal inside a family can go. The following week, David called me inviting me over for dinner at his house. "Dad, it's been a while since we all got together. Linda is making that roast you like." His voice sounded strangely cheerful, almost forced. I accepted the invitation without suspecting anything. After all, family dinners had been rare ever since Ellen passed away. I got there at 7 in the evening, bringing a bottle of wine and expecting a quiet night with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. What a fool I was not to see that this was a carefully planned trap. Dinner started out normal, with conversations about David's work, Ethan's school, and little everyday things. But I noticed something different in the air. Linda was more alert than usual, and David seemed nervous, constantly fidgeting with his fork. There was a folder of documents sitting on the sideboard in the dining room, right in plain sight, like it was just there by chance. You know that feeling when everyone knows something except you? That strange feeling started creeping over me as the minutes went by. Even Ethan was way too quiet, playing with his food instead of talking about school like he always did. After dessert, David got up and went to grab the folder. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something important," he said, pulling a chair to sit closer to me. Linda sat on the other side, smiling that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's about making your life easier, Norman. We brought some papers for you to take a look at." My heart started racing as soon as I saw the documents they slid in my direction. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something terrible is about to happen? It was like a dark cloud had just entered that dining room. "They're just some simple transfers, Dad," David explained, pointing to specific lines in the documents. "Just to make managing the property easier, you know? We'll take care of everything, and you won't have to worry about a thing." Linda added, "It's a broad power of attorney, Norman. Very common among families. This way you won't have to deal with all that annoying bureaucracy anymore." I flipped through the papers trying to understand, but the words seemed to dance in front of me. There were legal terms I didn't fully understand, numbers that didn't make sense. But deep inside, something was screaming that this wasn't right, that I was being led into a family legal trap. That's when Ethan knocked over his glass of juice and spilling it all over the table. "Oh, I'm sorry," he shouted, looking genuinely embarrassed. Linda got up, irritated. "Ethan, honestly." David sighed impatiently. "Go grab some kitchen towels, quick." While they rushed to clean up the mess, my grandson leaned close to me and whispered softly, "Grandpa, they want you to sign papers tonight so they can steal your house. I heard them talking about it yesterday." My blood ran cold. Within seconds, he went back to his seat like nothing had happened, helping dry the table. But those words echoed in my head like a deafening alarm. I went back to the conversation with my heart pounding, but I kept a calm face. "I'll take these documents home and read them carefully," I said, putting the papers away. David insisted, "Dad, it's nothing complicated. You can sign them tonight, we'll help explain." But I had already made up my mind. "No, son. I'll review them carefully and talk to you later." The disappointed look they exchanged was the final proof that Ethan was telling the truth. I left acting natural, said goodbye with kisses and hugs like always. That's when everything changed. I had just found out that my own family was trying to steal from me. I got home with my hands shaking and those documents burning a hole in my pocket. I locked the door, turned on all the lights, and sat down in Ellen's armchair to process what I had just found out. My own son, the boy I raised, taught to ride a bike, helped through college, was plotting to steal from me. Ethan's words kept echoing in my head. "They want to steal your house." You know that feeling when the ground just disappears beneath your feet? It was like 45 years of fatherhood had crumbled into a single sentence whispered by a 10-year-old child. I spent the whole night spreading the documents out on the kitchen table, reading every single line with doubled attention. It wasn't just a simple power of attorney like they had lied about. It was a full property transfer, hidden behind complicated legal language. They wanted me to sign my own eviction notice, handing over decades of hard work on a silver platter. There were clauses that would turn me into a tenant in my own house, dependent on their generosity to keep living there. Can you imagine the coldness it takes to plan something like that against your own father? It was an elderly inheritance theft scheme, executed with the precision of experienced lawyers. For the next 2 days, I felt like a ghost wandering around my own house. Every room I looked at carried the mark of my sweat. Every brick told the story of years of work under the Ohio sun, and they wanted to rip all of it away from me with a single signature. I sat on the porch where Ellen and I used to plan our future, trying to understand how things got to this point. You know that moment when you look around and realize you've built something so much bigger than bricks and cement? That's exactly how I felt. They weren't trying to steal just a house. They were trying to take away an entire life of accomplishments and memories. On Wednesday, David called me with that forced casual tone. "Hey, Dad. How's it going with those papers? It's nothing complicated, right?" The pressure in his voice was disguised as concern, but I knew my son way too well to be fooled. "I'm still reading, David. There are a lot of pages, and you know how careful I am with documents," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "It's just that, Dad, it would be good to settle this soon, you know, to really make your life easier." I hung up promising an answer soon, but my heart was pounding. Have you noticed how desperate people get way too impatient? That was exactly the tone I was hearing in my own son's voice. On Thursday morning, I gathered my courage and drove to the bank where I've had an account for over 30 years. I needed to clear up a few things before making any decision. James Miller, vice president and a longtime friend of mine, welcomed me into his office with the seriousness the situation required. When I explained everything about the documents and showed him the papers, his face grew stern. "Norman, you need to know that someone came here last week asking about your account," he said, pulling up the records in the system. My blood ran cold. They had already been digging into my assets for much longer than I'd imagined. "He said he was your son, asking for information about your investments," James continued, with that genuine concern of someone who's known our family for decades. Of course, we didn't give out any information, but they pushed hard, even brought in a power of attorney that looked suspicious. He went through the documents I had brought and shook his head in disapproval. "Norman, if you had signed this, they would have full control over your assets in just a few days. You know that feeling when you realize you escaped a trap by just inches? That's exactly how I felt." This family legal conspiracy was older and more elaborate than I could have ever imagined. I drove back home with my head boiling with outrage, and for the first time in decades, with a thirst for justice. They had completely underestimated this 72-year-old man. I went to my office, opened the safe hidden behind Ellen's portrait, and looked at all the neatly organized documents I kept there. Property deeds, my will, bank statements. There were over $70,000 in investments they had no idea existed. Ellen always used to say, "Norman, a prepared man is never caught off guard." Now I understood exactly what she meant. It was time to show them I still had a few cards up my sleeve. Over the weekend, I acted like everything was perfectly normal. When Linda showed up on Saturday with a cake, I made sure to be the same polite father-in-law as always. "Good to see you, Linda. How's everything?" She tried to bring up the subject of the documents, but I skillfully dodged it. Inside, I was watching every single move, every anxious glance she threw around the house. Have you noticed how people with hidden agendas can't stand silence? It was fascinating to see the tension grow on her face as I avoided talking about those papers. She left visibly frustrated, and that gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. On Sunday night, sitting in Ellen's armchair, I made my final decision. I was no longer going to be the passive victim of this family betrayal. They wanted to play dirty? Then I would show them how an experienced man plays when he has to. I started making a few exploratory phone calls, people who could be useful for what I was beginning to plan. Every conversation gave me more clarity about the next steps, but you won't believe what I was preparing for them. Some lessons in life can only be learned the hard way. On Monday morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in years. I looked in the mirror and saw the same man who had built a company from scratch, who had raised a family, who had overcome every obstacle life threw at him. They thought I was just a confused old man, easy to manipulate. What a terrible mistake. I sat down at the kitchen table, grabbed paper and a pen, and started writing down the key points of what needed to be done. Ellen always taught me that every solid plan starts with organization. And this time, I was going to plan every detail with the care of someone who can't afford to make a mistake. I picked up the phone with steady hands and called David. "Son, I've been thinking about those papers. How about you come over for lunch this Sunday? We can talk calmly and I'll make a final decision." The excitement in his voice was instant. He really thought he had convinced me. "Of course, Dad. What time? Is noon okay?" Linda shouted something in the background, clearly thrilled with the news. I hung up feeling a strange satisfaction. They had no idea they were walking straight into their own trap. In the following days, I kept myself busy with preparations. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, set up the dining room as if I were expecting very important guests. I put all my original documents in a separate folder: property deeds, bank statements, old company contracts. Every paper there represented decades of honest work, sweat poured under the Ohio sun. Ellen always said a clean and organized house was a reflection of a clear mind. It felt like I was not only tidying up my home, but also clearing my soul for what was coming. I only went out once that week for something essential. I drove to the office of Catherine Davis for one last legal protection. "I need to change my will urgently, Catherine. Delicate family matters." She helped me with her usual professional discretion, without asking unnecessary questions. In just a few hours, we had a new, clean document. Everything to Ethan, with explanations about the attempted family legal conspiracy. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I said, signing every page with determination. A strange calm came over me as Sunday approached. It wasn't the peace of resignation, but the serenity of someone who has finally decided to act decisively. I sat on the porch watching the neighborhood where I'd lived for so many years, thinking about how people can change when money gets involved. Dorothy Henderson, my neighbor, waved from her window. "Have a good weekend, Norman." I waved back, knowing my life was about to change forever. Some battles in life require courage, and I had finally found mine. I also called James Miller, my banker friend, explaining that I might need his professional expertise. "James, could you be available Sunday afternoon? I might need someone who understands financial documents." He agreed without hesitation, always ready to help. It was reassuring to know I had allies if the situation called for expert witnesses. Every scheme to steal an old man's inheritance leaves traces, and James knew how to spot them better than anyone. Ellen used to say that true friends show up in the toughest moments. Sunday finally arrived, bright and clear, as if the weather itself had decided to witness what was about to happen. I prepared a hearty meal: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, just the way David liked when he was a kid. The smell filled the whole house, making it feel warm and inviting. I wanted no excuses, no distractions. Everything was set up so they would feel safe and in control, completely unaware that I had turned the game around. When the clock struck noon, I heard their car pulling into the driveway. They came in smiling, full of fake warmth. "Smells amazing, Dad," David said, kissing me on the cheek like nothing had happened. Linda followed, carrying a dessert tray, while Ethan ran to hug me. I hugged my grandson tight, silently thanking him for opening my eyes. We sat down at the table, and for a while everything seemed normal. Small talk, laughter, forks clinking against plates. But I could feel the tension underneath their polite smiles. It was only a matter of time before the real reason for this lunch came up. After dessert, I stood up slowly and went to get my own folder of documents. I placed it on the table and sat back down, looking straight into their eyes. "Before we talk about your papers, I'd like you to take a look at mine," I said calmly. Their smiles faded a little, but they still tried to act casual. I opened the folder, pulled out my newly signed will, and placed it right in front of them. "Everything I own is now legally protected, and if anything happens to me, it all goes to Ethan." Silence fell over the table like a heavy blanket. Linda blinked several times, visibly uncomfortable, while David's jaw tightened. "Dad, you didn't have to," he began, but I cut him off. "I know exactly what you were trying to do," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Do you think I don't understand legal documents? Do you think I'd just sign away everything I've worked for?" The color drained from their faces. For the first time in years, they were the ones caught off guard. I pulled out their folder and pushed it across the table. "Here are your papers. And here's my answer. Absolutely not. My voice echoed in the room. I raised you better than this, David. And you, Linda. I welcomed you into this family as my own. What you both tried to do is unforgivable. Ethan stared at his plate, quietly watching the whole thing unfold. I stood up, gathered my documents, and looked at them one last time. Lunch is over. Get out of my house. And just like that, their plan fell apart in front of their own eyes. I woke up early on Sunday and started getting everything ready for lunch. I made the roast Ellen used to prepare for special occasions, set the dining room table with a clean tablecloth and the good plates. I placed the documents in a folder on the sideboard, neatly organized and ready to be presented at just the right moment. Every move was calculated, every detail had a specific purpose. I wanted everything to feel like a normal family lunch until the exact moment of the reveal. They had completely underestimated this 72-year-old man. As the time got closer, I started to feel a different kind of nervousness, not fear, but anticipation. It was like the feeling a chess player has right before delivering checkmate after so many calculated moves. I checked every detail of the house one last time. Table set, documents organized, the atmosphere warm and welcoming. Everything needed to look spontaneous, but I knew none of it was by chance. Genuine hospitality is the best way to disarm people. Have you ever felt that energy right before you completely turn around a situation that seemed lost? I stood by the living room window watching the street. Every passing car made my anticipation grow. I took a few deep breaths, remembering Ellen's words during tough times. Norman, the truth always finds its way. Today, I was going to be the way. I adjusted the table one last time, making sure the documents were in exactly the right spot. Soon my son and my daughter-in-law would walk through that door thinking they could fool me once again. What a monumental mistake they were about to realize. Finally, I heard a car pulling up. My heart sped up a little, but I kept a calm expression. It was time to show that some lessons in life can only be learned the hard way. I walked to the window and saw David getting out of the car, followed by Linda and little Ethan, who was focused on his handheld video game. A seemingly normal family coming for Sunday lunch at Grandpa's house. They looked relaxed, smiling like they were coming for a pleasant family gathering. Can you imagine the irony of someone coming to steal your inheritance while bringing the heir along? The doorbell rang and I opened it with a smile they wouldn't be able to read. "Hi, Dad. Something smells amazing," David said, hugging me warmly. Linda kissed me on the cheek. "Norman, you look great today." Ethan looked up briefly from his video game and waved. "Hi, Grandpa. Can I play in your backyard after lunch?" They all came in smiling, clearly pleased with how things were going. Linda carefully placed her purse beside the chair, while David praised how well the table was set. They seemed completely confident, relaxed, as if they had already won the game before it even started. Revenge on ungrateful children was about to be served along with Sunday lunch. We served lunch in an atmosphere that looked calm on the surface, but I could feel their anxiety hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. David went overboard complimenting every dish, while Linda kept making comments about the house decor. "Dad, you keep everything so well maintained," she said. But I could see her eyes scanning every corner, calculating values. Ethan ate quietly and then asked to play in the backyard. "Can I go outside, Grandpa?" And I made sure to say yes. We ate while talking about small things, the weather, the news, bits of neighborhood gossip. It was like watching actors pretending to be normal before the biggest scene of their lives. After dessert, David finally went for it. "Dad, how about we talk about those documents now?" Linda quickly grabbed her purse and pulled out the papers with a smile that barely hid her greed. "They're really simple, Norman. Just a few signatures to make your life easier." They spread the documents out on the table like salespeople pitching an irresistible product. It was fascinating to watch them try to disguise an elderly inheritance scam as a family favor. Have you ever seen scammers work this close? The coldness in their gestures was almost impressive. I picked up the documents and started flipping through them slowly, pretending I was having a hard time understanding. "I don't know. There's a lot here I don't really get." David leaned forward, impatient. "Dad, it's simple. Just sign here and here, look." Linda pointed at specific lines. "See, Norman, it's just your name. Nothing complicated." But I kept hesitating, turning the pages slowly, asking questions about terms I didn't understand. I could see the irritation building up in their faces. It was like watching pressure rise inside a pot ready to explode. "Dad, for God's sake," David finally exploded, losing his temper. "These are simple papers, anyone can understand them." Linda tried to soften it. David calmed down, but he was clearly frustrated. "We've explained this 1,000 times. It's just to make your life easier." I kept flipping through the papers with a confused look. "But right here it says, transfer of ownership. That doesn't sound like a simple power of attorney to me." The mask of patience was falling quickly from their faces. "Have you noticed how desperate people show their true nature when things don't go as planned?" And that's when the doorbell rang. We all froze for a moment. "Who could that be right now?" David asked, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "I don't know," I replied, standing up. "Let me see who it is." I walked to the door, trying to hide my relief. James had arrived at the perfect time. I opened the door, and there he was, smiling warmly. "Hi, Norman. You said you might need my opinion on some documents today." Linda whispered to David. "Who's that?" The panic on their faces when they realized there was an unexpected witness was priceless. "James, I'm so glad you came. Come in, I said, making sure to sound pleasantly surprised. "David, Linda, you remember James Miller, my friend from the bank." James greeted everyone politely while David and Linda exchanged desperate glances. "I was nearby and thought I'd stop in to take a look at those papers you mentioned," James explained, pulling his glasses out of his pocket. David tried to protest. "Oh, that's not necessary, James. It's just a family matter." But I was already handing over the documents. "Please, James. You understand this stuff way better than I do." James picked up the papers and started going through them with the precision of someone who knows a scam the moment he sees one. The silence stretched out like a rope about to snap. David drummed his fingers nervously on the table while Linda pretended to scroll through her phone. "Interesting," James murmured, frowning. "Mr. Price, are you aware that these papers are not a simple power of attorney?" David tried to cut in. "James, it's just a formality." But the banker went on, relentless. "In reality, this is a complete transfer of property. You'd be signing over everything you own, including this house." "What do you mean?" I said, faking total shock. "David, you told me this was just to make things easier." My son turned red. "Dad, it's complicated, but it's for your own good." James raised a professional eyebrow. "Mr. David, with all due respect, we're talking about a property valued at $1,200,000, plus investments totaling $5 million, and other assets around $400,000. Your father would be handing over an estate worth more than $6.5 million. The family legal conspiracy crumbled before our very eyes. That number echoed through the room like a death sentence to their ambitions. $6.5 million? I repeated, as if I couldn't believe it. "And you wanted me to sign this thinking it was just a simple power of attorney?" David tried one last desperate move. "Dad, you don't understand. This is to protect everything." But I was already on my feet, shaking with indignation that was no longer an act. "Protect it from who, David? From me? From the actual owner?" Linda stood up too, trying to calm things down. "Norman, let's talk about this calmly." James cut her off coldly. "Ma'am, this is documented elder fraud. That's a federal crime that carries up to 20 years in prison." That's when I dropped the mask completely. "You really thought you could trick me?" David panicked. "Dad, it's not what it looks like. You're misunderstanding." Linda tried to back him up. "Norman, this is a terrible misunderstanding. James is misinterpreting the papers." But I smiled with a coldness that made them both flinch. "The truth always comes out, David. You underestimated this old man." David kept denying. "These are legitimate documents. We just wanted to help." I looked him in the eye and answered. "Then why did you lie, saying it was just a simple power of attorney?" 40 years, I said, my voice rising. 40 years I spent building all of this. 40 years waking up at 5 in the morning, sweating under the sun, paying wages, building not just a company, but a family. And my own son, the boy I taught to walk, who I took to school every single day, who I put through college, comes into my house with fake papers to steal from me. David tried to step closer. Dad, let me explain. But I stepped back. Explain what? How you spent weeks planning a conspiracy against me? How you faked concern for my age while preparing to evict me from my own house? Get out, I said, with a coldness that even surprised me. Get out of my house now. Linda tried to cry. Norman, please. But I was relentless. Go call Ethan from the backyard and leave. You can be sure he'll be well taken care of, but far away from the influence of parents who try to scam the elderly. James placed the papers back in his folder. Mr. Price, I recommend you press charges. I have everything documented here. David begged one last time. Dad, we're family. I looked straight into his eyes and replied, family doesn't try to scam the elderly. Family doesn't plot behind your back. You chose to be criminals instead of children. The revenge against ungrateful children was complete, and justice had never tasted so sweet. After David and Linda left taking Ethan with them, the house fell into a silence that I couldn't tell if it was peace or emptiness. James put the papers back in his folder and said goodbye quietly, understanding that I needed to be alone. I walked through the house, looking at each room with different eyes. The living room where I raised David, the bedroom where I dreamed about the future, the kitchen where we made so many family meals. Now everything felt more mine than ever. It's strange how discovering a lie can make the truth shine even brighter. In the days that followed, I settled into a new routine. I woke up early, took care of the house, read the papers on the porch. There were no more pushy phone calls from David, no more visits with hidden motives from Linda. The silence that used to bother me now felt natural. It was like I had gotten my independence back. Some afternoons, sitting in the armchair, I even managed to laugh thinking about their shocked faces when James explained those papers. Age had made me sharper than they ever imagined. Gradually, I started enjoying my life without that constant pressure. I went back to walking around the neighborhood, chatted with neighbors I hadn't seen in months, and even started thinking about small projects for the house. Each day felt lighter without having to doubt every phone call or visit. I no longer needed to stand guard, always on alert. It was freeing to discover that I could just live in peace, without schemes or conspiracies hanging over my head. Life had gone back to being simple. Weeks later, Ethan began to show up from time to time, always dropped off by Linda, who stayed in the car. Can I visit Grandpa? He would ask, and I always said yes. During those visits, he told me about how tense things had been at home, about how serious his parents seemed lately. Grandpa, do you still like me? He asked one afternoon with those worried eyes. Ethan, you're my favorite grandson, I said, making him laugh. I'm your only grandson, Grandpa. And that's exactly why he was my favorite. These visits reminded me that not everything in the family was lost. Today, sitting on the porch, I look at the same horizon with a calm I hadn't felt in months. The house is still the same, but I'm different. I learned that sometimes you have to be firm with people, even when it hurts. Ethan will grow up knowing that his grandfather knew how to stand up for himself when it mattered. In the end, it was just a situation that had to be settled. And now I can live peacefully, without pressure, without hurry, just enjoying every day left in this house I built with my own hands. And now I ask you, who stayed with me through this story, have you ever faced family betrayals that tested your limits? How would you react if people close to you plotted against you for money? Have you ever had to choose between forgiving and protecting yourself? Share in the comments your own experiences with relatives who crossed unimaginable lines out of greed. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every day I bring real stories of men who faced family injustices and rebuilt their lives through courage. Keep going strong on your own journey. Truth and dignity always find their way even in the toughest moments of life.